wave of Indian masters crossing in the Himalayas into Tibet, and we have the other three schools of Tibetan Buddhism slowly being formed. One of those schools that was formed is called the Kagyu School of Tibetan Buddhism, and the system of practice that was brought into Tibet from India is Mahamudra, called Mahamudra. And then we have another masters coming into Tibet who, on the basis of their teachings, we have the Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism formed, and the system of teachings that was brought into Tibet here is called Lam Dre. Lam Dre is a Tibetan word. Lam means path, Dre means result. So this is paths and result. So again, it's a system of practice that was introduced to Tibet, and that's the main system of practice in the Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism. And then we have other masters bringing another system of practice into Tibet called Lam Rim. Lam means path, Rim means stages, so this is stages of the path to enlightenment. And this system of teachings forms the basis of what's now called the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. So the word Nyingma means old school, original school. Whereas the other three schools together, collectively, are called the Sama schools. Sama is a Tibetan word meaning new schools. So this came from the 8th century, these from 10th, 11th century onward. So that's why they're the new schools, the Sama schools. Now, here we have the root, it says the root text for the Gelug Kagyu tradition of Mahamudra. So how do we get that title? So this system of practice of Mahamudra came from India. So we have this system of practice coming from India through particularly great masters Tilopa and Naropa, who then passed this teachings on to Mapa, who was Tibetan translator, and one of his main disciples was Milarepa. And Milarepa is often considered to be the greatest yogi in the history of Tibet. And then sort of concurrently with this, we have another Indian master, Lama Atisha, bringing, so this is the Mahamudra lineage, and Atisha was bringing the Lam Rim teachings into Tibet. And his main Tibetan disciple was Trongpa. And then these systems of teachings were passed down, master-disciple, down to to Tsongkhapa, Lama Tsongkhapa, around the 15th century. And it's Tsongkhapa who really expanded on these Lam Rim teachings, who's considered to really be the founder of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. But what happened also was that we have one of the main disciples of Milarepa was Gampopa. And what Gampopa did was he took these Lam Rim instructions from this lineage here and synthesized the Lam Rim and the Mahamudra together, and he's considered to be the founder of the Kagyu school. But what Tsongkhapa did, he also took Mahamudra instructions from the Kagyu lineage, and through that we have the Gelug school of Mahamudra. So that's where this text is coming from, is that following Tsongkhapa, passing down, we have Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen. That in the Gelug tradition, of course, mainly we talk Lam Rim, but there is this Mahamudra lineage of practice in the Gelug. Tsongkhapa receiving a lot of instructions because he also had masters in the Kagyu school, and then he passed down this system of practice, master disciple, down to Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen. And he's the author of the text that we have here. Now, Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen, we see the word Panchen, which we can divide into two. Pan is an abbreviation of Pandita, a Sanskrit word meaning scholar, great scholar. Chen is short for Chenpo, is Tibetan for great. So Panchen means great scholar. But also, Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen was also a great meditator. He was very renowned as a great meditator as well. And in the Gelug system, those of you who are a little bit involved in the Gelug tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, maybe you heard about Guru Puja, and then there's Medicine Buddha Puja. Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen is the author of both of those texts that are used for those rituals, for those pujas. So he's widely known, particularly in the area of Tantra Vajrayana. So therefore that's where this Mahamudra that we are following this weekend fits. That it's within the Gelug school, but of course a lot of the instructions that we have in this text are coming from the Kagyu Mahamudra lineage. So any questions about sort of the background? Anything not clear there? Okay. So let's, yeah.
So when you say Gampopa founded Mahamudra, so what?
No, he didn't found Mahamudra. He's the founder of the Kagyu school. Mahamudra was already coming down here. So Mahamudra was an oral lineage passed down. And what Gampopa did was he synthesized that with the sort of the structure of Lam Rim, and then formed a sort of a systematic approach to Mahamudra, and that is the basis of the Kagyu school. So he's considered to be the founder of the Kagyu school.
So in India, there was also Mahamudra at the time. It came from Loka and
Yeah, I mean, there's another legend. I mean, there are other Indian masters here. Another Indian master that had some influence here was Maitripa, who was a contemporary of Naropa. But this is the main lineage that they're following.
And where does the Vajrayana is this picture?
Yes and no. The Mahamudra lineage here, as we're going to see, is encompassing also the Vajrayana, and also within Lam Rim, we can also talk about Vajrayana. So it'll become more clear as we go through the text. So it's included. Okay, so let's have a look at the structure of the text that we're going to follow. So if we go to the first page of your text, at the top it says, here in explaining the instructions... one more thing I wanted to mention about Panchen Losang Chigi Gyaltsen is Panchen Losang Chigi Gyaltsen here was the main tutor of the 5th Dalai Lama. And the Panchen Lama and Dalai Lama had a very close relationship, in that in between one Dalai Lama passing away and the next one coming of age, a gap of maybe 20 years, during that period the Panchen Lama was the spiritual head. So they sort of was like that. But this Panchen Losang Chigi Gyaltsen was particularly well noted as a great scholar and great meditator and the tutor of the 5th Dalai Lama. And the 5th Dalai Lama is one of the most revered of the Dalai Lamas. Okay, so let's have a look at the structure of the text. So top of page 1 it says, here in explaining the instructions on Mahamudra from the tradition of the holy beings who are scholars and adepts. So here the word scholar is this word pandita, Sanskrit word, and adept here is a translation of the Sanskrit word siddha. We talk about mahasiddhas, great siddhas. So here we're talking about panditas and siddhas. There are 3 outlines. So there are the text is divided into 3 sections. So the first part of the text here says entering into the composition. Then it says the actual explanation of the composed instructions. And then the third part here in the text, it talks about the dedication. And this is a very common structure that we see, particularly in Tibetan Buddhism, in writing texts. And entering into the text, we usually see 2 parts to that, and we see that in the next paragraph. And that is that first we see some sort of homage, that the author is paying homage to someone or something, and then they're making a promise to compose the text. And then what we see in the actual explanation, if you go down a bit further, you see the actual explanation is divided into 3. The preliminaries, the actual practice, and then the third one is conclusion. And then if we go over the page to the actual practice, we see that there are 2 levels of practice here called Sutra and Tantra Mahamudra. And then within the Sutra Mahamudra, we can see that there are actually two parts to the sutra practice, and that is, the first one is called shamatha, and the second part of the practice is called vipassana. So this is basically the outline that we're going to follow, and we're going to be today looking at the first. Right now we're going to look at the entering into composition. It's very brief. Then we're going to look at the preliminaries. The preliminaries is what's called the foundation practices that we need to engage in to have a good basis or foundation for Mahamudra practice. So we'll look at what those preliminaries are. And then in this text here, he first presents Tantra Mahamudra, then Sutra Mahamudra. And the reason he does that, because in fact, in terms of us practicing, we would first practice Sutra Mahamudra, then Tantra Mahamudra. But because the main part of this text is about Sutra Mahamudra, he just gives a very brief explanation of what Tantra Mahamudra is at the beginning. But in terms of our practice, of course, this comes before this. So we're going to have a look at this brief introduction into Tantra today. So these are the topics that we're basically going to cover today. And then tomorrow we're going to look at the shamatha practice, the practice of cultivating this calm, clear, focused mind. And then the vipassana practice, or vipassana part of Mahamudra, and the conclusion, and in the conclusion, part of that section of the text is what to do post-meditation. Because in any practice, there are two parts. There's meditation and what to do after meditation. So that's what's being presented here. So this is going to be the topic for next year. We're going to look at the vipassana part of Mahamudra plus what's post-meditation, and of course also the dedication, which is very brief. So that's the structure and what we're going to be following today, tomorrow, and also next year. Okay? So let's begin. So the first part, of course, is the entering into the composition. There are two parts here. There's a homage and a promise to compose. And this is very common structure to texts. That first the author will pay homage to someone or something. And here we see the Panchen Lama is paying homage to two things. The first one is still written in Sanskrit, Namo Mahamudraya. So Namo here means homage. And we see this in Sanskrit, and this is often the case that in Indian Sanskrit texts that have been translated into Tibetan, you often, in the Tibetan, see that the title is still written in Sanskrit, and often this first homage is still in Sanskrit. The reason being is to show that this is not some sort of Tibetan invention, that it's coming from the Indian tradition, and also to give us a little connection with the Sanskrit language. So that's why we often see this still in Sanskrit at the beginning. So again here, Namo Mahamudra Ya just simply means paying homage to Mahamudra itself. And then in the next paragraph, he's paying homage to his teacher. He says, I respectfully bow at the feet of my peerless Guru, Master of Adepts, who directly exposed the Great Seal of Mahamudra, the all-pervasive nature of everything, the indivisible, inexpressible, and indestructible sphere of the mind. So here he's paying homage to his teacher, and he's using the word Guru here. And Guru is a Sanskrit word, and literally it means someone heavy with qualities. And generally in Buddhism, when we use the word guru, we're talking about someone who is highly qualified in the Tantra or Vajrayana level of practice. And he says he's a master of adepts. Adept here is the translation of Sanskrit word siddha. And we often hear about, in Indian Buddhism, the so-called Mahasiddhas. Maha, again, great. Siddha, here translated as adept. So a Mahasiddha is some great high-level practitioner of Tantra or Vajrayana. And he said that his teacher directly exposed the Great Seal of Mahamudra. So directly exposed Great Seal of Mahamudra is that his teacher explained Mahamudra to him through his direct experience, that he had a direct experience of Mahamudra and he was transmitting that to Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen. And he says here that Mahamudra is the all-pervasive nature of everything. So again, Mahamudra is referring to emptiness, and emptiness is the all-pervasive nature of everything, that everything that exists, all phenomena, are empty of independent existence. Nothing exists independently. And it says here that, that this is the indivisible, inexpressible, and indestructible sphere of the mind. So this word indestructible here is coming from the Sanskrit word vajra, something that you can't destroy. And it says that it's indivisible and inexpressible. The sphere of the mind here really means the nature of the mind. So it's indivisible, meaning that the nature of the mind, of course, is emptiness, which means emptiness and the mind itself are indivisible. You can't have the mind here and emptiness here. They are indivisible. And here it says it's inexpressible. Emptiness being inexpressible means that you can't use language to describe the experience of emptiness, because the experience of emptiness is a realization of non-duality. So that experience is a completely non-dualistic experience. And so, of course, language is conceptual, dualistic. So it's impossible to describe a non-dualistic experience using dualistic language. So that means inexpressible, that you can't use words to directly describe it. So he's paying homage to his teacher and to Mahamudra. And then in the next paragraph, this is the promise to compose. He says, I shall now write down instructions on Mahamudra coming from the Gelug Kagyu tradition of the supreme adept Dharmavajra and his spiritual sons, a tradition of excellent instructions having gathered the essence of the ocean of sutras and tantras and oral instructions. So he's saying now he's going to write down these instructions on Mahamudra coming from this lineage, this Gelug Kagyu lineage. And he uses he's talking about Dharmavajra. So I've rubbed it out now here, but the Dharmavajra is one of the great masters that was in the lineage between Lama Tsongkhapa and Panchen Losang Chögyal Gyaltsen himself. So he's referring specifically to this Dharmavajra master in that lineage. And he's saying he's now writing down these instructions, because previously they were oral instructions, that the master would pass these instructions down to the disciple, and that's how it was passed down as an oral lineage. But now he's writing down these instructions in this text. And he's saying that it's gathering the essence of the oceans of sutras and tantras and oral instructions. So this, as we see, this Mahamudra practice, we can practice at what's called the sutra level and the tantra level, or the Vajrayana level. And we'll have a look at what those levels look like, of course, a little bit later in the text. So that's the sort of entering into the text. And this is very common that you'll see, particularly in the Tibetan texts. They'll always begin with some sort of homage and then making a promise to compose to help them to be able to finish the text. Any questions about that before we go to the actual explanation?
I have a question about just like the whole concept. What do we do with this text? For example, Sadhana Mahamudra, we say that, Shukam Shukam Rinpoche, and go through it on a daily basis or periodically. Would we take this text and repeat it, use it as part of our practice?
Well, what you could do, probably this text is a bit long we've got here, but the root text is quite short. You could sort of go through that. It's good to get a more extensive explanation, think about it. Then the root text is very brief, and then having studied it, that would just remind you of the various aspects. So you could do that. So sometimes people do that in a very short text. They would either memorize it or just go through it to remind themselves of the various aspects of the practice. And sometimes, like in the Lam Rim, is a whole system itself, of course. Sometimes we have these very brief texts which outlines the main steps in the practice, and then you do what's called a glance meditation, where you just briefly reflect on each point to keep that clear in our mind. So you could do that, but of course that would be just to be clear about the overall system. But then, of course, within that, you'd need to do more than that. Of course, you'd need to really practice each of these parts more thoroughly to really penetrate them. And just doing this, and that's all we do, okay, it wouldn't get very far, I think. But yes, it could be helpful to keep clear in our mind the framework of practice. Sure. Okay. Let's have a look at the actual explanation. So here we see in the middle of page 1, it says the actual explanation of the composed instructions. Regarding this, there are 3 outlines: preliminaries, actual practice, and conclusion. So again, preliminaries here is the foundation practices. What practices do we need to do as a foundation for Mahamudra? And then the actual Mahamudra practice and conclusion. And again, conclusion includes what to do outside of meditation, post-meditation instructions. So let's now have a look at the preliminaries. What preliminaries? What is the foundation for Mahamudra practice? And here, again, so anything in bold is coming from the root text, and what's not bold is being added from Panchen Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen's own commentary on his root text. So it says here, in order to have a doorway for entering into the Dharma and a central pillar for the Mahayana, sincerely go for refuge and generate bodhicitta, without these being merely words from your mouth. So here it says, in order to have a doorway for entering into the Dharma and a central pillar for the Mahayana. So here we have this, what's called a doorway or door of entry. And the word Dharma can have many meanings. And one meaning of the word Dharma is coming from the root Sanskrit dur, and dur means to hold. And Dharma, one meaning of the word Dharma, it can mean just phenomena. So we can talk about dharmas, meaning all things that exist. So sometimes you'll see that in the text, phenomena. So dharma can mean that. But generally, when we see the word dharma, most often we're talking about one of 2 things. There's what's called the Dharma of Scripture and the Dharma of realization. So the Dharma of Scripture is the words of the Buddha, either the oral teachings or the written text. So this is Scripture. Dharma of realization